I know it's Aris and Uachtaráin. I don't want to put words in the President's mouth or beside me, but I think he'd like to think of this not just as the President's house, but the people's house. Because this is why they have these events and they have as many people here as they possibly can. I'm pleased to ask you to welcome onto the stage, representing and embodying the Irish people, President Michael D. Higgins.
Bírar thuaimhnes an gédal sias mahan héin agus san ma bhean céile saibhín agus gachtainna go bar san áras tá fíorcinn fóilsear ó bhíleag. Agus áthas an dánaram go bhfuil muid beagnach béidir ag brath ar an aimseach tá bhíad tántálinn go dtí seo agus is ionta chun ráit seo. Ócáid spéisialt agus muid ceiliúra agus muid ag tuairteáin de 75 bliain An Taisce. Agus ach go háir hena léon grúpa ceap héanú tá mé fécinn siar ar rin chomhláthúras a bhídar as an méid amachas amach in nehíos tábhachtaí níomháin an glúinseas as na glúnta atóra teacht. So on behalf of Sabina and Dan and everyone who's working in Áras and Uachtaráin, it gives me a very, very great pleasure to welcome you all. As I have just been said, I must have to be respectful of the weather. We've been lucky so far, it's been very, very good, and I hope that you enjoy all of your time in Áras and Uachtaráin. Sean Moncrief and I, indeed, he needn't be worried at all about mentioning. We represented one of the glorious moments of RT Don't Feed the Gondolas a long, long time ago, and what opportunities were there then. But I just want to say that I'm so grateful to Sean. I don't embarrass him by saying I read his column regularly because I regard him, he's a fine person with the pen, and he writes so beautifully, and I'm so grateful to him for helping us today. It is a special day because we're celebrating the 75th anniversary of An Taisce, and I've been really rethinking what I had written and rethinking about how important some things are now. We may be entering a set of decades where there will be no proper records. And therefore, what you share with each other and your memories and experiences of working for the environment and the organizations and the different relationships between the different organizations and all of the movements and confrontations and so forth, it will be important that you keep good records of them. Because the alternative is worse than as if there was nothing there. The alternative is as if you get a kind of a bland reconstruction of how we were encountering versions of heaven inevitably every year after year without the slightest difficulty or opposition. It is important to be truthful about all of these issues, and I'm so pleased that there are so many stalwarts here. I do want to pay tribute to so many people. We have so many distinguished guests. I congratulate the most recent recipient of the Freedom of Dublin City, of course, Duncan Cogart Questlad. Which I often think back in relation to brave people. I'm glad that Derek Hamilton, whom Sabina and I would have known all of those struggles, and Brendan Smith and others who are here. Brendan, who has done just such remarkable work, left such a fantastic legacy, he's leaving such a legacy. But I do remember very, very, very much Professor Emer Colleran, Professor of Microbiology and so forth. I remember the stands that she had to take on her own, standing in front of people who had been fed a mixture of lies, deceit, and an abuse of ignorance when we came to matters of heritage and so forth. So nothing fell from the sky. And the good news is that Duncan was telling me about the attendance at something organised by Brendan Smith and himself about the secondary school teachers and the secondary school students and so forth are all taking on all of these issues na tíoplaachtar agus is na háireachta, and doing so with such great enthusiasm. But I often think about it as well, because I'm perhaps writing something soon about something else. It's 100 years since where people at this moment, 100 years ago, we were preparing the 1923 Land Act. And it is very interesting, the choices that were rejected then. Many people had got land towards the second half of the 19th century. Were they turning and saying, who has got nothing yet? No, they said, we want more, 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 more. It's for another day, but you might ask, for example, the 1924 Land Commission, the 1924 Commission on the Future of Agriculture, and the brave work of people like Tom Johnson and Mr. Duffy and others, who suggested, for example, what were you to do with the 1.34 million acres undivided left around the big houses? And the majority report was originally, well, there'll be something for everyone. And this was quickly dropped, and it was that Labour Party minority report that said there should be tillage, because we should be told how to grow food. The agriculture, all the machinery was there, the glass houses were there, and so forth. And the majority view in many cases was, the cattle thing is too hard to stop now. It has been unleashed, and so forth, and so on. So right from the foundations of the state, where the land was there, not Mother Nature in all its diversity, its great wonderful ability to restore itself, its ability to carry variety and whatever like that, but land as possession, land as respectability. And then, of course, what would happen later, it's for another day, and I'll talk about it another day. The cattle could go trampling through those places like that, through the houses, then into the houses, and then you could take the roof off the houses so as not to have to pay tax. And then you could sell the lead under the roofs of the houses, and you were well on your way, if you like, to what was, if you like, the heaven of the cattle jobber. And all of this at the same time, when you had people, for example, what were the agricultural labourers to do? Waiting there. You could have had, in fact, jobs in the tillage. You had, in fact, also all the jobs in the domestic economy. Women trained to extraordinary high skills in relation to cookery, in relation to household management, and so forth, and all of this. And this was the difference. That was a minority report signed by 2 people. Majority, and the other thing was, don't hold us back. And much of the struggle of the people gathered in this room were facing people who were saying, we mustn't be held back. And to what a pass we came with our burning planet and our degraded agriculture, our loss of skills, our lost people, and so forth. And this huge thing, which is the heart of what we have to decide next year and every other year, and that is the distinction between who is a farmer and who is in fact putting land as part of their land portfolio. Unavoidable questions, and gathered in this room are the principled people who took the long view. Excuse my going on a bit longer about this, but it was just that the way that the year is full. And it is such a beautiful thing. It is such great in many cases, An Taisce, established in June 1948 as a non-governmental organisation, active in the areas of the environment and built heritage. It is a foundational environmental and non-governmental organisation, and then surrounded with many others with whom it had good relations. The driving force behind it was, of course, the great naturalist and engineer, Dr. Robert Lloyd Prager. I always remember the excitement of that book, which had practical things about wading through a river, and what was the most appropriate clothing to wear, and which would dry quickly without injuring you. This was all wonderful people embracing and respecting. And his inaugural address, broadcast live on radio in 1948, included An Taisce's mission statement, which you will recognise it, how relevant it remains today, to promote the permanent preservation for the benefit of the nation of lands and buildings, of natural beauty, or natural, historical or artistic beauty, and as regards land, to preserve as far as practicable its natural aspects and features and animal and plant life. And there is a relationship there expressed in those words of something that is not broken between our species and other species. I won't go into it, for it's again another one of the things that I'm working on in relation to, we're not very far off what might be accurately described as species failure in relation to forms of life on the planet. May I take the opportunity to welcome then all of the different and the groups that play their part in environmental conservation and in wider heritage conservation. I'm delighted to be joined by so many organisations and by the Heritage Council. I have to speak about the Heritage Council because there's someone to whom I really often felt I wanted to pay more and more tribute, and that was the late Michael Callanan. When I became Minister for Arts, Culture and the Gates after the elections at the end of 1992, and he came to see me and he was very ill. And because of his work, and I pay tribute to the Morris family and all of what they've done in relation to this, is that we had moved from one of the ugliest buildings in Dublin, down, we would best not name it, but on the bottom to Municipal Road. And I remember Michael Callanan was often too ill to even take the lift. And we would sit downstairs and have the discussion. He had the thing on a non-statutory basis, and the worry was that if we didn't get the statute ready quickly, that in fact we could fade back and lose the relationships that he had established with previous Taoiseach and others. And sometimes we would go out to his house and we would discuss and I just wanted to say thank you to those earlier people in that period of the Heritage Council. Now in Cola, I think that's good. I think it's true to say as well that, and it still remains a huge issue as to how you want cén santan táta chuna chuairt cuasaí Oireachta. The beautiful word in Irish is Oireacht. Much better word than the word heritage, which is a colder word, frankly, but a word in Cola Oireachta. And it was to include everything, which is include what was tactile and what was remembered and what was sung and what was experienced, both lived and what was consumed, and everything from food to song and so forth and all of that. And we discussed all of that. And into this then came what is a great example for councils and people who are running councils and what is like that was the wonderful late Frida Rountree. And Frida, who died so young, in many cases, had an extraordinary ability. She was one of the very earliest people, and I think my daughter Alice Mary is something similar, in being able to work with other people and other organisations, and even from people all around her in Longford and places like that, is that she was, instead of taking a text and imposing it at anyone, Frida kept discussing about where we would get the thing that would make everybody comfortable. I feel about the council, and I remember looking for the building, the headquarters in Kilkenny and whatever, and I see a challenge that remains in many, many cases. It worked well, it was quickly established, produced good contributions and so forth. But I think there were times when it imposed a conservatism on itself, and there were important issues, both national and international, upon which its voice should have been more strongly heard. And the lesson in all of that is, in that little opportunity and slot of time given to you, when you're able to do something that was not done before or neglected, seize it with energy and so forth. In many, many ways, republics are not built on caution. Republics are suppressed by caution. And I think, therefore, those days we achieved an enormous amount. I think the biggest contribution, without a doubt, will have been in the reform of the legislation in relation to the built heritage, which was very, very, very significant. And then that great revolutionary act that was involved in getting heritage officers established across local authorities, which was the one again about the local arts officers which had to be established in local authorities. And I remember the quality of the debate. There were those who wanted the thing to work, and there were those who would ask it, will he be reporting to the engineer or to the assistant manager or to the manager? Or should it be the county secretary and so forth? And that deadliness delayed the appointment of arts officers, heritage officers, but it eventually came to be. But it's the difference between the people looking for the comparative advantage internally and those who are committed to wanting something to happen for the benefit of future generations. But I do want to say I mentioned that great dungaree wearing a naturalist already. And what a great pleasure it was to have known Tim Robinson. And I do hope, in relation to the institutions where I worked for such a long time in University of Galway, that good sense breaks out. And they honour the commitment and understanding they had with the Robinson family. And Tim Robinson and his life partner, Marie, passed away in 2020. They're so missed. And it was something like this. Can you imagine somebody arriving with a bicycle and saying to a person living locally, what name did you have for this, and so forth. And that's again where I think it is just so interesting why your all authentic histories are so important. We didn't give up heritage, respect for it, or the environment, or for the names of things, or plants, or people, or history. We had another language imposed upon our language, with our language suppressed. And you cannot speak honestly about Cuairse Ireachta without speaking about those who saw in the language that was the language of the spoken people, the beauty, the way that there were several words and terms for both objects of nature and artifice in the Irish language. And I pay tribute to heritage, to those in this room, either town made operatá janta aka or Sanagailke. And you know, the good news is when I meet young people now and they speak Irish to me, Irish is cool, and Irish, for example, you don't have in fact to carry the 150 different prohibitions about your body and soul with you in order to speak the Irish language. That became in a late 19th century abuse in relation of spirituality. And that's why it is in relation to Taisce, Heritage Council, all the other organisations, and all the local organisations that are gathered around here. And there are things in which we're way ahead, for example. Yes, I might be severe in how slow some of it was to do, but on the passing of the legislation, for example, and the relationship with the National Museum, in the part of this island for which we have responsibility, you don't have treasure trove, because it is written in many cases that anything that is found is the property of the people of Ireland in perpetuity. And you know the most interesting thing of all of this, no more than over in the broadcasting forum and everything like that, nearly everything was, the main principles of it were achieved in the first 6 months. And all this was going on at the same time in a new department that had been established from scratch. And I want to thank all of those public servants, wonderful like the late Colin McBreen, and people like that who worked day and night in many cases. And I would think we were going to have an evening off or something, as suddenly the Cultural Institutions Bill would have wrapped something out. But there were people who worked on those bills that I respect very, very much as well. People who do hard work every day, which I respect. But it's very, very important to have the energy that's there at the foundation retained. I remember Tim's deep love conversations about the burden. And once again, the closer you are to the rock, the warm rock, the better it is, because I signed agreements in relation to heritage with some of the biggest organisations, forming ones and others, in formal signed documents that were broken very, very, very quickly. But then the people who never had it out for a second were what we signed with the people in the burden. They were for it, they understood it, and I so admired the way that they stuck with it. And that was the reason when now King Charles used to be visiting, he used to be struck by the intelligent relationship they had with what they were dealing with. Now, all of you here, as people, citizens, as organisations, An Taisce, Heritage Council, local heritage groups and whatever, you have helped us so much. The people coming in now have such a wider, more generous opportunity for meaning and resonance, embracing not only what is tangible and visible, but what is spiritual. And I think that has brought new challenges to the Heritage Council and to Taisce. And I want to wish all the former members and all the existing members every success in their objectives. I commend all of the existing and previous chairs, CEOs, boards and staff members for rising to the challenge of broadening and mainstreaming the term heritage and so forth. And as I said, it required, as I mentioned about Emer, it required personal fortitude, patience and often abuse, directed personally. Thank you for all you bore in the name of the future generations that will thank you for all of that. And the good news is that they are all coming because they see the sense and the wisdom of it. And the groups that we celebrate today, Tomide An Taisce, Tomide Kuluralob, are in fact actually they've played such an important part. I do want to thank those who are entertaining us as well today in other ways. The staff and volunteers in Goilidachus, a voluntary organisation that continues to do so much for the development of Irish medium education and which celebrates an important 50th anniversary. Tres Limliv, Kogortka, Saradjaki, It is one of the most interesting things, that when we're coming to it now, when I talk to friends and so forth, from Africa, from South America, wherever like that, it is that part of Ireland that they like. The part of an Ireland that has a particular history that it has chosen not to forget. A set of obligations through the Sustainable Development Goals to which it's really committed. The respect for Mother Nature, for what is indigenous and so forth. And we are among the first countries to which they turn because of this. And all the younger people coming in, all these new organisations and so on, will have such great allies. And if our cultural heritage, I think, one of the great legacies of all this work will be the building of increased public awareness of and engagement with our rich and diverse heritage. And it's happening. And it's wonderful to see and so forth. I think our cultural heritage, it will be of benefit at all. I think of the Green Schools Initiative and Taisce, the Heritage Council's Heritage in Schools scheme. And I think all of this, in many cases, it's not only about learning it all off, but also of touching the earth and knowing the richness of it all in every way. This is something too as well, you notice it has never known any boundaries, because the effects of nature, the consequences of nature, the opportunities that we are presented with are ones that know no boundaries. And I often think back, I remember talking to Peter Brook about his great aunt, the gathering of the last pieces of Irish language poetry in Ulster and so forth. All of these pieces of Ireacht and Sáilíocht and Nádúr, they belong to all of us and belong to all of humanity. And it's so wrong that they would ever be used as a divisive principle in any way. I think ag tógáil an Sáilíocht sin ag tuairt aantas don Sáilíocht atá roinse an tá sé feartómhachta. And I think all the education initiatives are going to help. At the moment, all the people are outside there we were around the country, but the judging is on in the tidy towns. But what's great encouraging to see is when visits and goes around as well, the mixture of generations that are involved, mixture of people from different spaces and origins and cultures. I think it is so important because Taisce from the beginning stressed the interdependence of things. And that is why the most powerful movement that is happening now on our planet at the present time is the combining of the consciousness of ecological issues, justice issues, and good economic issues that says simply about it all. We weren't brought onto the planet to be insatiable, but in fact actually to experience the fullness of life with others. I think I want to say thank you for the profoundly valuable contribution that you've all made. And then I think as well, which is great to see, the oceans which connect us all and which are so important, and on which, above which and beneath which to be managed by internationally responsible organisations, reportable and open. And I think that the Spring Clean and Clean Coast programme are, again, further examples of great work. I do think, because people say in many, many cases, it would be a great pity if papers simply began to appear and people just noted them as just another depressing statement or whatever. But we are warned. We are not any longer on a slide. We are now in decline. And the paper published by Queen's University Belfast was frightening in that. And we don't need to be told again and again by the International Planet and Climate Change. What we have to do now is to take that consciousness that's there and turn it into pressure and actions, and to make sure that the items are the top policy items when crucial decisions have to be made. And I think that today we are celebrating An Taisce, the celebrating of the National Heritage Council. But I think one of the most important things about it as well is to think in a way conservation is not, in fact, actually an invitation to a funeral parlour. Buildings have been lived in with different usages. Artisans have put stone upon stone. I remember one time about very early on in my days as minister going down to take over a very important building on behalf of the state. And I did say to some of the people outside, you needn't spend all your time on the portraits because they're not of your ancestors, but do give a bit of time to your ancestors who did that beautiful masonry work and the iron work and all of the work that they did on the silver and everything that was used inside of the house. I congratulate all of the staff. Tris Liam live. Gan ma bhuicas mar uachtarana here in le gachtan a bhí cargus cuma cén aman a rashid le shna hagris she sulia. I want to pay tribute to the board members and staff existing, the CEO, Gary Fremantle, and Chair Phil Carney, as well as all the staff and volunteers of all the state. I also want to thank all those state workers who are proud to be working in the public interest for the state. I do want to say again my Jan Cara Sean McCreef for his warmth and professionalism. And anyway, Sean, that's another thing as well. Remember, think of all that education we did through Hot Press. And now, the point about it is the entertainers, the musicians, that wonderful family from Cara Kathleen and Condon Clore, Aoife and Sean Lyons, the One Voice Choir, Mis Amigos and the Havana Club Trio, Westmeath Colters, Rob Fair, Angus McAuley, Good Joe, Lisa O'Neill, God Knows, and Shashkin, who I might add, are playing together now for 53 years. 53 years Shashkin playing together. I want to thank all of the staff and the Orson Outron who do a huge amount of preparatory work to make occasions like this possible at all. I want to thank the Oris staff for looking after us and doing it so, and the first aiders and the OPW staff and the Garda Síochána and everyone. Anya a bhí cargus cuma chuin cuiine rátú cánu dún mó bhuicas le. When gach teanna was an trónóna, berbara.